All right, shalom, shalom, family. This is Zephaniah here again, and I have for you another one. All right, another source giving credibility to our Black Jewish ancestry, and this source is going to be coming from the book, The Life of Olaudah Equiano. Okay, what we have been doing is we have been quoting from scholars, historians, anthropologists, all right, people with a wide variety of background and credentials, education, etc. But this time, our author is going to be a slave himself, all right, somebody who can attest to the culture and the customs of the people of which he comes from. Okay, a little bit about him. He was taken into slavery as a boy at the age of 11. He became a sailor and strategically used his abilities and workmanship to buy his own freedom. Okay. It is here that he became an abolitionist, and with his literacy in the English language, he used that to write his own autobiography, of which we are going to be reviewing today. All right. So this is coming from page 3, and this is just a little background on the author. All right. He is from the kingdom of Benin, it says here in the paragraph marked that part of Africa known by the name of Guinea. We're going to look at this in a second. To which the trade for slaves is carried on, extends along the coast above 3,400 miles from Senegal to Angola, and includes a variety of kingdoms. Of these, the most considerable is the kingdom of Benin. Now, when you read further, Mr. Equiano here, he is from this kingdom of Benin. All right, he was born in 1745. Now, if you'll recall, in the previous source that we received, we looked at the book Hebrewisms of West Africa. All right. And in that source, I showed you guys a picture of this map known as Negro Land. Well, within this area of Negro Land, you have a place called Guinea, all right, or Southern Guinea. And you can see it listed on the map here. And within Guinea, you see that there is the Kingdom of Benin. All right. I have it encircled. And this is modern day Nigeria. This is where Mr. Equiano was born. Okay. He's born in this kingdom in Guinea. Now, let's look at some of the practices that his people engaged in. All right, this is very important. He says here in the paragraph at the bottom, we practice circumcision like the Jews. Interesting. They practiced circumcision and made offerings and feasts on that occasion in the same manner as they did. Wow, interesting. What else did they do? He says, like them also, our children were named from some event, some circumstance, or fancied for bodying at the time of their birth. What does this mean? The children were named with what we call nomen omens. In other words, the children were named with a destiny attached to them, or they were named based off of a circumstance that was occurring at the time of their birth. This is all throughout the scriptures, guys. A prime example of this is in the Messiah himself in Matthew 1 and 21, it says that she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus or Yeshua, and he shall save his people from their sins. Well, when you look up the name Yeshua in Hebrew, the name literally means to save or to deliver. Okay. In other words, he was named based on the destiny that he would be, that he would fulfill in his lifetime. All right. So we can see these three practices already on page 20: the practice of circumcision, the naming the children on the circumcision date on the eighth day, and the fact that they had nomen omens. Okay, they had destinies attached to their names. Furthermore, when you go to the next page on page 21, he says, I have been remarked that the natives of this part of Africa are extremely cleanly. This necessary habit of decency was with us as a part of religion, and therefore we had many purifications and washings. Pay attention to this, right? They had many purifications and washings. Indeed, almost as many as used in the same occasions, if my recollection does not fail me, as the Jews. Interesting. Those that touched the dead at any time were obliged to wash and purify themselves before they could enter a dwelling house. Every woman, too, at certain times was forbidden to come into a dwelling house or touch anything or any person or anything we eat. I was so fond of my mother, I could not keep from her or avoid touching her at some of those periods, in consequence of which I was obliged to be kept out with her in a little house made for that purpose till offering was made, and then we were purified. brothers and sisters, what does this sound like? This sounds like a page out of our book itself, out of the Bible, out of Leviticus, out of Numbers. You can see this. Purifications and washing like the Jews. What purifications? Well, we know that in the book of Numbers, chapter 19, if anybody touches a dead person, you had to be purified. And there are laws that tell you exactly how to do this. It's all recorded in that chapter. Furthermore, he talked about when the women were put away, when they were put in a little house, okay, when they were on their menstruation. He said that he was so fond of his mother, he would go and leave with her. Brothers, this is right out of the book of Leviticus, chapter 15. All of this is in our scriptures, okay? And keep in mind something. Mr. Equiano and his countrymen, they didn't have Bibles, okay? There was no Christian missionaries to come here and tell them all this. These are things that they were just doing naturally. This is coming from page 25. It says here, starting at the paragraph toward the middle of the page, such is the imperfect sketch of my memory, has furnished me with the manners and customs of a people among whom I first drew my breath. And here I cannot forbear suggesting what has long struck me very forcibly, namely the strong analogy which even by this sketch, imperfect as it is, appears to prevail in the manners and customs of my countrymen and those of the Jews. I'm going to repeat that last line. It says, appears to prevail in the manner of customs of my countrymen and those of the Jews. What he is basically saying is the customs of these Africans in the country of Benin, all right, or in the country of the kingdom of Benin, excuse me, in Guinea, those customs and manners are analogous to those of Jews. How is this possible? How is this possible? Well, brothers and sisters, we know how it's possible because they were already keeping these things, okay? Look what he says. It says, before they reached the land of promise, and particularly the patriarchs, while they were yet in the pastoral slate which described in Genesis, an analogy which alone would induce me to think that one people had sprung from the other. So basically, what he is saying is our customs and their manners, excuse me, their customs and manners were so similar to that of the Jews that it led him to believe that one had sprung from the other. In other words, they descended from these people. Okay, moving forward. This is coming from page 26. All right, it says here, like the Israelites in their primitive state, our government was conducted by our chiefs and judges, our wise men and elders, and the head of the family was, and the head of the family with us enjoy a similar authority over the household with that which is ascribed to Abraham and the other patriarchs. The law of retaliation obtained almost universally with us as with them, and even their religion appeared to have shed upon us a ray of its glory, though broken and spent in its passage and eclipsed by the cloud with which time, tradition, and ignorance might have enveloped it. For we had our circumcision, a rule I believe peculiar to that people, and we also our sacrifices and burnt offerings, our washings and purifications, and the same occasions as they did. When you go and look at all these different customs and practices, there is a verse or a whole passage or a whole chapter in the law, in the Torah, in the first 5 books of the Bible that you can quote word for word verbatim. He talked about the patriarchal heads of households, Numbers chapter 30. He talked about the governmental structure of having judges and wise men to rule over the people, Deuteronomy chapter 1. He talked about the law of retaliation, which is basically the law of the revenger of blood in the book of Numbers chapter 35. We already went over the circumcision. That's recorded in Leviticus chapter 12. Burnt offerings and sacrifices. I mean, there's so many verses in the law that talks about that. And you see here that Mr. Equiano here and his countrymen are keeping all of those things. Moving forward, okay, because I want you guys to pay attention to all this. When he is saying these things, he's saying it in retrospect, okay? They did not have any Bibles. But when he's taken as a slave, eventually he learns to read in English. And when he learns to read in English, he reads a Bible for the first time. Look what happens. It says here on page 112, okay, I'm going to start at the second line, where it says, fortunately, this man soon became very much attached to me. He's talking about the person who first helped him read the Bible, all right? Mr. Daniel Queen, I believe his name was. He says this man was attached to him and took very great pains to instruct him in many things. He taught me to shave, to dress hair a little, and also to read the Bible. Look at this, explaining many passages to me which I did not comprehend. I was wonderfully surprised to see the laws and rules of my own country written almost exactly here. The laws of his country, a place where they had no Bibles, were written almost word for word here in the Bible that he is first learning to read. So again, brothers and sisters, in conclusion, Olaudah Equiano and his countrymen did not have Bibles. There were no Christian missionaries to come and try to convert them at this time. So how is it that they're keeping these customs and traditions? Well, as Mr. Equiano stated earlier, one people sprung from the other, all right, based on his analysis. And it is not until after he learns to read in English and he reads a Bible for the first time that he is realizing the influence of Hebrew culture on his own, all right, on that of his own countrymen. So again, I just want to provide this other source for you guys coming from a eyewitness testimony, a man who is living in this culture himself, showing you that his culture and that of the Jews are basically parallel.